The question that we've been asked is how do I use the prepayments? For this, I'm going to use a very simple example. Let's use an example of stamps. Let's say you buy a lot of stamps from Canada Post and you're going to use that for your client and you're going to use it for your office. How do you manage this? So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my prepayment chart of accounts. Okay. So we have like several kinds of chart of accounts. I'm going to create a new one called stamps. So I'm going to create a new one called stamps. So let me create a new one, asset. It's prepaid, and I'm going to call it Canada Post stamps. Okay. Now, stamps are generally, $1, right? So let's say we bought 100 stamps, so that's $113. So we're going to hit the action button, and then we're going to purchase that. So we'll say, hey, today on the 27th, I bought Canada Post stamps for $113 because that had taxes. You can say $101 stamps purchased, right? And I'm going to post it to the Canada Post account. Maybe I paid it using my credit card, right? I can say, hey, I paid it using my credit card, and obviously I paid it to Canada Post, right? And I can hit the submit button. What have I done now? All I have done is I've told uLaw that I have purchased stamps worth $113. That means so much money has been taken out of my credit card and posted into my asset. Okay, at this point, that's all has been done. Now, what happens is, let's say there's actually that expense is happening. I'm using 5 stamps or 10 stamps I'm using for my office, right? What I can do at that point, or let's say I'm using 50 stamps for my office, right? So what I can do at that point is I can say action, right? And I can say asset, periodic transfer, and let's say it's postage, right? And I can say, hey, I am putting $50 here, right? And that's calculating, the total amount. And I can say, hey, that was out of my Canada Post. This is I used it for sending Christmas cards or something like that. And you can say, 50 stamps for Xmas cards, right? This is an office expense, purely an office expense, but I already bought the stamps, so I'm not going to be posting it to my bank account because the purchase has already been. Now I'm just using it. So I could do like that and hit the submit button. Now what does that do? What it does is it puts a credit on that on that asset account. So now the asset from $113 that I had has reduced to $56.50 because now I've used 50 stamps. I've sent 50 postcards, right? So it's done. Now, sometimes what can happen is a similar kind of expense can actually happen on a disbursement. For example, you can go here and say, add new disbursement, and you can say, hey, I'm paying that from prepayment as well. It's my Canada Post stamps, and I can say, hey, sent 50 letters, stamp charges, right? And I can say, hey, the same thing. You know what? Maybe I'll charge the client $60 for that because hey, I want a margin there because I bought the stamps, I did the work of pasting them, so I will charge you. But my expense here, however, is only 50, and it calculates that, and obviously now the HST is being transferred as well, and you hit the save button. Now clearly, when I raise an invoice, you will see that I would transfer. I would be basically collecting $60, as a disbursement charge, but my expense was only 50. So now let's go back to the accounts. Now you see that $113 is now completely used. $50 was used for internal purpose for Xmas cards, and $50 the stamps were used for sending these 50 letters on behalf of the client. So putting the balance back to $0. So basically, the prepayment feature will be used when we have to buy an asset in advance, store it, and then that asset can be used for office or client. If it's office, you will post it right from here, and if it's a client, you'll actually post it as a disbursement, and from here. And yeah, obviously you need to choose the right category, like what kind of prepaid it was, or what kind of category it was, and you can post it that way. So when you do this, HST is also properly marked. So let's go to the HST, and I'm going to first go to the receivable. And if you look in the receivable, you will now see, that obviously there's no receivable yet because I haven't raised the invoice. Let's look at the payable, and when you look at the payable, you will now see that for the two stamps expenses, you see the 650 and the 650, the total of $13 actually being posted properly. And it makes a lot more sense when you actually view this from the asset account, which is the Canada Post account, where you say, hey, the 113 transferred from my credit card and stored as an asset, and then this one withdrew a portion of it, which is an expense plus the taxes, and the office expense withdrew the rest of it. Okay, hope this complex feature is now clear, but if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach us at ulawpractice.com.